Your favorite golden era rapper was a mumble rapper. The one you swear was a lyrical genius. The one you hold up like they were sent from the heavens to save hip hop. They were the mumble rappers of their generation. I said what I said.
I am Broadway, the lyricist, homie, just let me do my thing. I'm on top, on my grind, I'ma always get it.
I know. You already cursing me out on your keyboard. You about to go crazy in the comments. I get it. But before you do, I need you to sit there with me for a minute. Because I'm about to show you something that's going to make you at least reconsider everything you thought you knew about the history of the culture. Because the truth is, and I mean this with every ounce of love I have for this music, the golden era and the current era of hip hop have more in common than either generation wants to admit. And I want to go over some of the evidence with you. But first, thank you guys so much for clicking on this video. I go by the name of Broadway the Lyricist. I'm a hip hop enthusiast and cultural storyteller. And if you're a fan of hip hop commentary, history, or anything related to the culture, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell icon so you never miss an upload. All right, so today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm not talking about one artist or one album. Today, I'm kind of zooming all the way out. We're going to look at two different eras of hip hop. The golden era and what we're living right now. And we're gonna put them side by side and see what actually holds up. Because here's the thing about nostalgia. Sometimes it lies to you. Sometimes it takes everything that you loved and it polishes it until it shines. And sometimes it takes everything you don't understand and makes it look worse than what it actually is. And hip hop fans, we are some of the most nostalgic people on the planet. So the question today is not which era is better, because that's kind of a tired debate. The real question is, are these two eras even as different as we think? Or are we just watching the same story play out with different names and different fits? Now, real quick, before we go any further, let's define what we're actually talking about when we say the golden era, because that term gets thrown around loosely. Depending on who you ask, the golden era of hip hop spans roughly between 1987 and 1997. You got the explosion of New York lyricism, Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, KRS-One. Then you move into the early 90s that gave you Nas, Biggie, Wu-Tang, Jay. On the West Coast, you got Dr. Dre, Snoop, and Tupac defining gangster rap and G-Funk. And then somewhere in the middle of all that, you got Tribe, you got De La Soul, and you got the Native Tongues bringing the conscious alternative. It's genuinely one of the most impressive decades of music ever produced. I am not here to take that away from it. But here's what I need you to understand. While all of that was happening, people were saying that hip hop was dying, that it had no future, and that the new artists weren't as good as the ones before them. Does that sound familiar? See, hip hop has always been at war with itself across generations. Every era looks back at the one that came before it and worshipped it, while dismissing whatever is current as a degradation of the art form. That cycle, that's not new. That is the culture. And today I want to break that cycle down, chapter by chapter, and show you exactly where the golden era and the current era are looking in the same mirror without even knowing it. Let's start with the big one, the one that golden era fans say the most whenever they're talking about modern hip hop.
These kids can't rap, all they do is mumble.
I myself am totally guilty of this. Future, Young Thug, Uzi, 21 Savage, Playboi Carti. Pick your target because there's always a target. And the criticism is always the same. The lyrics don't mean anything. You can't even understand what they're saying. There's no substance. And look, like I said, I hear you because some of that is valid. But I need you to also hear this. In 1993, Snoop was actually criticized for being too laid back and too melodic. People said his delivery was lazy. They said he wasn't a real rapper. In 94, when Biggie dropped Ready to Die, older hip-hop heads who came up in the Native Tongues era, they said Biggie was just another gangster rapper with nothing meaningful to say, that he was glorifying violence, that he was gonna ruin the youth. And Lil Wayne, who golden era fans now hold as one of the greats. Lil Wayne was being called a mumble rapper before that term even existed. His freestyles and mixtape era had people in the late 2000s saying he was overrated, his words were nonsensical, and that he was more style than substance. Now here's the thing about mumble rap that people don't really sit with. In some cases, what gets called mumble rap is often melodic improvisation. It's using the voice as an instrument rather than a vessel purely for words. And before you say that's not real hip hop, I'd argue that Bone Thugs and Harmony built an entire legendary career doing exactly that. Even Rakim, the God MC, was criticized by the generation before him for being too monotone, too cold, or too unemotional. Every generation picks its scapegoat, and every generation's scapegoat ends up being the next generation's legend. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. Let's talk production, because the criticism of modern hip hop isn't just about the rappers. It's about the beats too. Golden era fans will tell you that boom bap was real music, that the sample-based production of producers like Pete Rock, DJ Premier, RZA, Large Pro represented the height of musical craftsmanship. And again, they're not wrong. That era produced some of the greatest beats ever created. But here's what they conveniently leave out. When boom bap producers started sampling James Brown, George Clinton, and Sly Stone in the late 80s, the artists who made that music were furious. They said hip-hop was stealing their work. They said it was lazy. They said it wasn't real music because it wasn't being performed. It was being taken. That very production style that golden era fans worship was called illegitimate and unoriginal by the musicians who came before it. Fast forward to today, Metro Boomin, Southside, Pierre Bourne, Murder Beats. These producers are building sonic worlds out of 808 drum machines, synthesizers, and hi-hats in ways that are genuinely innovative. And yet, they get the same side eye that Pete Rock and Primo got from jazz musicians in 1991. And let's talk about regional sounds. This is another thing that both eras share. In the 90s, the entire conversation in hip-hop was East Coast versus West Coast. New York's gritty, sample-heavy sound versus Dre's polished G-funk. People argue constantly about which coast was more authentic. The idea that one regional sound could define all of hip-hop led to one of the most tragic chapters in the culture's history. Today, the same argument is happening between Atlanta's trap sound, Detroit's rawness, Chicago's drill, and New York trying to reclaim its dominance. Different cities, same exact argument. The stage just rotated, but the play is the same. We got to talk about this drip. We got to talk about fashion because this one is definitely polarizing. If you spend any time on social media, you've probably seen a lot of older generation fans make fun of how current rappers dress. Once again, guilty as charged. The designer brands, the face tattoos, the jewelry stacked from wrist to shoulder, the oversized everything. They be saying these kids look ridiculous. Back in the day, we had style. I ain't gonna hold you. For the most part, I agree. But in some cases, I want you to think about what back in the day looked like. We're talking about Dapper Dan custom Gucci tracksuits in Harlem in 88. We're talking about FUBU, Karl Kani, Cross Colors, brands that were specifically designed to be louder and more expressive than anything mainstream fashion was doing. We're talking about Slick Rick with more chains than Mr. T, eye patches and Kangos, Run DMC making Adidas a cultural institution without a single endorsement deal because the drip was just that hard. And none of that was considered classy by mainstream culture at the time. The mainstream looked at hip-hop fashion in the 80s and 90s the same way people looked at Uzi's forehead diamond, like it was excessive and reckless. The culture has always used fashion as armor, as identity, as a statement. Whether that's a Coogee sweater on Big or a Rick Owens fit on Gunna. It's the same impulse. It's hip-hop saying, yo, we exist, we are visible, and we will not shrink ourselves to make you comfortable. So before I clown the current generation's fits, I try to remember the generation before ours was clowning ours, and the generation before them was clowning theirs. And somewhere there's a version of you in 1988 with a fresh pair of Adidas and a Kango who would absolutely clown you for clowning them. Something that both eras have in common that nobody talks about when they're comparing them, that's the moral panic. In 1985, Tipper Gore co-founded the Parents Music Resource Center, aka the PMRC, specifically to combat the explicit content in music. And while it targeted rock as well, hip-hop was very much in their crosshairs. In 1989, the FBI was sending letters to NWA's record label about fuck the police. The state of Florida actually tried to prosecute 2 Live Crew for obscenity. Congressional hearings were being held. Record labels were forced to put warning stickers on albums. The message from the powers that be was clear. The music is dangerous. The music is corrupting your children. The music needs to be stopped. Does that sound familiar? Because right now, in cities all over the country, local governments are using drill music as evidence in criminal trials. YouTube is demonetizing videos. Police departments are monitoring lyrics. Politicians are blaming the violence in their communities on genres of music instead of addressing the systemic conditions that produce that music. Same panic, same targets, same scapegoat, different decade. And here's the thing, this is actually one of the clearest through lines between the two eras, because hip-hop has always been treated as inherently criminal by institutions of power. And that didn't start with drill, that didn't start with trap. That started the moment that black youth in the Bronx picked up a microphone and said something true about their lives that the world wasn't ready to hear. The golden era didn't escape that. The current era hasn't escaped it either. And that shared experience of being criminalized by the mainstream, That's literally a part of what makes hip-hop hip-hop. Here's one thing that hits different for true hip-hop heads: the commercial versus the authentic debate. One of the biggest criticisms of the current era is that it's too commercial. The artists are chasing streams, playlist placements, and brand deals instead of making real music. That the culture has been swallowed by the industry. Pause. And look, there's something real in that concern. The streaming economy does incentivize certain things over others. The relationship between artists and labels has changed, and all of this is worth examining. But let me remind you of something. When Jay-Z dropped Reasonable Doubt in '96, underground hip-hop heads respected it. But when he dropped Volume 2, Hard Knock Life in '98, and used the sample from Annie, the musical, they called him a sellout. The Timbaland and Swiss Beats era of his career had the purists saying he abandoned his roots for mainstream appeal. Biggie was called too commercial by street hip-hop purists who felt he was performing for suburban white audiences. Kendrick Lamar is now revered as one of the greatest ever, but for a stretch of time, there was a loud contingent of hip-hop fans who said he was overrated, too safe, too industry-friendly. Drake built the biggest fan base in history of rap music and was dismissed by hip-hop purists as soft, not a real rapper, too melodic. The goalpost for authentic in hip-hop has always been moving. Because the truth is, commercial and authentic have never been mutually exclusive in this culture. They just feel that way when you're too close to it. Give it 20 years. The artists that golden era fans are dismissing today will probably be the ones that the next generation holds up as the standard. It literally never fails. I want to introduce you to a concept that I think explains almost everything that I've been talking about today. And that concept is retroactive canonization. Here's what I mean by that. When we look back at the golden era of hip-hop, we remember Illmatic, we remember Ready to Die, we remember 36 Chambers, we remember The Chronic, we remember the absolute peaks of a decade of music. What we don't remember is what we collectively decide to forget. The hundreds of albums that came out in that same era that were forgettable, derivative, or just straight up bad. Because for every Nas, there were 20 artists that put out albums in '94 that nobody's streaming today. For every classic, there was a landfill of mediocrity that the golden era also produced. Time is the greatest quality filter in the history of art. It keeps the best stuff, but buries the rest. When you compare any current era to the past, you're comparing today's average to yesterday's highlights. And that's not always a fair fight. And this is crucial because 10, 15, 20 years from now, the current era of hip hop is going to go through the same process. The Kendrick Lamar album is going to be somebody's Illmatic. The Travis Scott production era is going to be somebody's Dr. Dre era. And there's going to be some kid in 2040 making a YouTube video about how the music of the late 2010s and 2020s was a golden era that we don't appreciate anymore, while dismissing whatever's current at that time. We don't see our own era clearly while we're living in it. We never have. And that's not a weakness. That's just what it means to be human. But it should make you a little more careful about writing off an entire generation while you're still in it. Listen, I want to be fair with you because I've been making a case this whole video for similarities between the two eras, and I think the similarities are real and they're significant. But intellectual honesty requires me to also acknowledge where genuine, meaningful differences do exist. The streaming economy has fundamentally changed how music is made. When golden era artists were recording albums, the album was the unit. Every song had to serve the larger project. Filler existed. But artists were thinking about the sequencing, narrative arcs, and how an LP breathed as a complete body of work. The incentive was to make something cohesive. Today, the incentive is to make something that hooks you in the first 7 seconds before you skip to the next song. Spotify pays per stream, TikTok needs a drop. The economics of the platform shape the art, whether the artists want them to or not. And that's produced a lot of music that is genuinely built for consumption rather than reflection. Is that a problem? Honestly, yeah, I think it is. I think it's contributed to a certain shallowness in the mainstream that's harder to defend than the shallowness of past eras. But, and this is critical, it also has produced artists who are figuring out how to make meaningful work within those constraints. Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers was one of the most complex and emotionally demanding albums in hip-hop history. And that was released in the streaming era. It didn't compromise, and it proved that the era is not the enemy of the art. It's just a landscape that the artist has to navigate. The tools change, the constraints change, but the artists who are serious about the craft will always find a way to make something worth keeping. That was true in 1993, it's true right now, and it'll be true in 2040. So here's where I land in all of this. The golden era paradox is not that the golden era was secretly bad. It wasn't. It was genuinely extraordinary. The paradox is that every era of hip hop has been golden to the people who were living in it, and every era has been dismissed by the ones who weren't ready for it. The rappers your parents called noise became your heroes. The rappers your heroes called garbage are becoming someone else's heroes right now. That's not a glitch in the system. That's the system working exactly as hip hop was designed to work. Hip hop has always been about the next generation taking what was given to them and doing something with it that the previous generation didn't expect. That's not a betrayal to the art form. That is the art form. And the golden era, as real and as monumental as it was, would not exist without a generation of artists who took the music of the past and shaped it into something that the gatekeepers of that time said was not legitimate, that was not worthy of respect, that was not real music. So the next time you're about to write off an entire generation of artists, I want you to pause. I want you to remember this video. I want you to ask yourself, am I making a genuine artist critique, or am I just getting old and calling it wisdom? Because honestly, hip hop doesn't owe any of us nostalgia. It owes us the truth. And the truth, as always, is complicated. And that's what I love about the culture. Even when it frustrates me, even when I don't understand where it's going, it always surprises me when I'm brave enough to follow it there. But ladies and gentlemen, that's hip hop, the golden era paradox. I want to know where you stand on all of this. Do you agree that the two eras are more similar than we admit? Or do you think that the differences are too big to ignore? Be sure to drop it down in the comments. Let's have a real conversation down there. And if you got something out of this video, be sure to hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel more than you know. And if you're new here and you want more hip hop commentary and cultural deep dives, again, hit that like, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell icon so you never miss an upload. And if you want to see more videos just like this, be sure to click on one of my playlists to see more. I'm Broadway the Lyricist. Thank you guys so much for watching. I truly appreciate y'all. Peace.